An Echo of Kings by Melissa Delport. The path they wandered through the thornwood was dense and overgrown, a tangle of bark and vine which snatched at the woman's cloak and seemed to hiss at her trespass. Her shoulders stooped, and a stray wisp of silver hair escaped her cowl. She walked with a staff, her hand gripping the handle so tightly the pale flesh appeared bloodless. A few paces behind her, the boy pummeled at the leafy foliage. It seemed impossibly tall, and yet was dwarfed by the trees which towered above. Their boughs so heavy with leaves they created a canopy through which not a ray of sunshine could penetrate. It was cold in this place, and the boy shivered despite his heavy woolen cloak, which trailed the ground and gathered around his feet, threatening to bring him to his knees. The boy would not trip, not while the woman could witness it. She spoke to him from time to time, in a voice like flint. Occasionally, the boy responded. After a time, they both fell silent.
"You're falling behind."
Her instruction was clear, and the boy picked up his pace, though his feet were leaden, the soles blistered and bruised within the rigid leather of his morning boots. They rested in a small glade, peppered with wild mushrooms. The woman drew her blade, an ornate dagger, which drew fire from stone when the two met, and set about making a fire. His belly filled, the boy slept. He woke with a start, pulled from his nightmare by fear. He had dreamed of his mother, as he always did, ever since the day they had left the palace, 2 moons ago. His mother had not been particularly beautiful, certainly not as beautiful as the one who had come for her, but she had belonged to him as he had belonged to her. He missed the feel of her soft hand on his cheek, the sound of her voice as she sang him to sleep. As brave as the boy was, he was only 5 years old and a very long way from home.
"Beck?"
The woman stood nearby, shadowed eyes watching from beneath the folds of her cape. Beck didn't answer, but he bobbed his head in acknowledgement of the silent question. Satisfied, the woman sheathed her dagger.
"We should keep moving,"
she said. Beck ignored the painful protest in his feet and followed. For a few miles, the woman cast dark glances over her shoulder at Beck, but not by a flicker of his dark brow did he betray his discomfort. Finally, when he could take it no longer, he called to her.
"Lisbeth."
She was beside him in an instant.
"What is it?"
Blushing, he stammered his need and watched her jaw tighten.
"Well, be quick,"
she snapped. Beck didn't need to be told twice. He scampered into the thicket as quickly as he could until he could no longer see her tall form.
"That's far enough,"
Lisbeth warned. Despite the distance he had put between them, she sounded as though she were right beside him. Stifling a sigh, Beck set about his business. Before heading back, he gingerly lifted the cloak to inspect the faded yellowed bruise which spread across his ribs. It was still visible all these weeks later, oblong, the exact size of the boot which had inflicted it. He'd taken only a few steps back toward Lisbeth when a cold hand clamped down on his mouth, stifling his cry of fright. The attack had come from the heavens, from the trees, and before Beck could kick out against his assailant, he was hoisted into the air. Lisbeth's patience was wearing thin. Her anxiety peaked whenever the boy was out of sight. He was a beautiful child, with the dark curls and slow black eyes he had inherited from his father, but already he was proving to possess his mother's will. Varus blood, Lisbeth thought wryly. Untamed and pure. A golden thrush rattled its call, and Lisbeth's hand reached for her blade.
"Beck,"
she hissed, her lips pulling away from her teeth in a snarl. Beck did not reply. Lisbeth saw them then, the shadows nestled between branches. Highly trained, everyone as deadly as half a dozen men, huntsmen had come for the boy. With a practiced eye, Lisbeth scanned the trees. A shadow, larger than the rest, caught her attention. Fools, if they thought they could conceal him from her,
You will not escape this place alive.
Lisbeth warned. The shadows laughed, low and heartfelt.
What will you do, crone?
A cruel voice called.
I will not warn you again.
One by one, they dropped from the trees, black capes billowing behind them like great bats descending from their caves. The scarlet insignia adorning their chests made her skin crawl. She despised it, that symbol that would forever remind her of her failure.
6?
Lisbeth scoffed when they had her surrounded.
Your queen has grown arrogant.
The seventh man brought Beck down with him. The sight of the boy's face, pale and petrified, while his eyes shot her pure apology, sent a wave of fury down Lisbeth's spine. She stilled her racing heart and allowed herself a calming breath. Huntsmen they may be, but these men would still bleed red. In one swift motion, she seized the pommel of the sword hidden within the staff. Despite the absence of sunlight, the golden blade gleamed, and at the sight of it the men gasped as one. Without allowing them time to recover, Lisbeth threw off her cowl, revealing the silver hair and violet eyes that no man in any of the 7 cities could fail to recognize. To their credit, none of the men fled at the sight of the silver guard, but their legs did tremble, and their palms slicked beneath the pommels of their swords. Were Lisbeth Farron not the legendary personal guard of the Varus line, they still would have paused. Hers was a combative beauty, but a beauty the likes of which most men would never see, even if they lived 1,000 lifetimes. When Lisbeth smiled, the world would grant her any favor, but right now there was nothing soft about her predatory, hostile face.
Release the boy.
The men darted glances at one another, too afraid to take their eyes off her for more than a second, lest she cut them down before they could even raise a sword against her.
By order of Queen Nerissa, you are under arrest,
one brazen fool announced. He was the first to fall. Lisbeth became the storm that she unleashed. She showed no mercy, striking with single-minded purpose over and over, until the golden blade was ribboned crimson. When she finally ceased, only one huntsman remained, the one who held Beck before him like a shield against her destructive power.
Release the boy.
Lisbeth snarled again, her face twisted into a mask of malice and bloodlust. The huntsman didn't waver.
I would die before I betrayed my queen.
You did that already when you failed to protect Milana Varys.
At the sound of his mother's name, Beck blanched. His lower lip trembled for only a breath before he gritted his jaw and raised his chin in defiance of his momentary weakness. Uncaring, the huntsman smirked.
Milana Varys was never my queen. What did she ever do for the North?
He spat at the ground as though to prove his point.
The old ways are dead and buried, along with her cold corpse. But,
he smirked then, enjoying her anguish,
if you are so desperate to punish those responsible for your queen's death, perhaps you should turn that sword on yourself, Silver Guard, and drive it through your heart. After all, it was you who was sworn to protect her.
His words rang true. Even the forest seemed to still waiting for her response, whether it be denial or admission. Lisbeth had spent her life protecting her queen, captain of the Queen's Guard, and she had failed. Were Milana Varys alive today, she would argue that Lisbeth had been following her orders, that it was she who had told her to flee the castle, to take Beck and run. Lisbeth's men had fallen, trampled underfoot by Nerissa's huntsmen, until only Lisbeth stood between the queen and her princeling, and a veritable army. Lisbeth could still hear the spun sugar softness of Milana's voice as she pleaded for Lisbeth to save her only son.
You have served me well, Lisbeth. I could not ask for a better warrior or a better friend. But now you must go. You cannot save me, not this time. But you can save my son, if you hurry. Take the Queen's corridor. It'll bring you out deep in the woods.
I cannot leave you.
Lisbeth had insisted.
You have no choice. This is my final order.
At that, the regal queen had dropped to her knees beside the trembling boy.
I wish I could see the man you will become, Beck. I wish I could be there to witness you take back your throne. Be brave, my beautiful boy, and know that I am always with you.
Mama,
Beck had begun to cry in earnest, but his mother had only hugged him tightly and then shoved him toward the woman she trusted most in the world. Drawing a slim dagger from her dresser, she'd met Lisbeth's eyes with fierce determination.
I will buy you time to get him to safety.
For the first time in Lisbeth's life, tears had welled in her eyes.
You cannot ask me to leave you, Majesty.
Queen Varys had smiled sadly, then invoked the full force of her will. She was, after all, Lisbeth's queen.
I'm not asking you, Lisbeth. Now go.
It had been weeks since Lisbeth had snatched up Beck's hand and plunged into the dark bowels of the Queen's corridor, an escape tunnel which ran beneath the castle and emerged into the thornwood. But she could still hear her queen's screams echoing behind them.
My queen gave her life to protect that boy.
Lisbeth hissed, baring her perfect sharp teeth.
If you think I will let you take him from me now, huntsman, you're even more stupid than you look.
Your queen was weak. The throne belongs to Nerissa.
Lisbeth allowed herself a small smile.
The throne belongs to the boy.
Her words served their purpose. With a howl of rage, the huntsman cast Beck aside and lunged for Lisbeth. She met him head-on, their swords colliding in a clash of metal and fury. The huntsman was a formidable adversary, but Lisbeth fought for something greater than he could possibly understand. Inch by precious inch, she pushed him back. She did not yield, she did not falter, and finally, when the man cowered on his knees in the dirt, she pressed the lethal point against the vulnerable flesh at his throat.
Come here, Beck,
she said softly, never taking her eyes off her opponent. In a flash, the boy was at her side, straight-backed despite his fear.
I will not kill you, huntsman.
Lisbeth crooned, though she very nearly had. The man would need weeks to recover from his injuries.
I have a message for your queen, and you will deliver it. Tell her that Beck Varys lives. Tell her that the throne she stole belongs to him, and when the time is right, he will come to claim it. Her magic will not save her, and her guard.
At this, Lisbeth looked down her nose in disdain as the man struggled for breath before her.
Will not stop the tide of my vengeance. Her blood will stain the castle stone when I am done.
A long moment passed. Beck shifted on his feet, then cast a questioning glance up at his guardian.
can we go, Lisbeth?
He asked, in a voice as weary as the long-forgotten song of a caged bird. Lisbeth nodded and slipped her free hand through his.
Tell your queen.
She reminded the huntsman as they turned to leave.
The true king lives, and the silver guard is coming for her.
The end.